Right, welcome to another episode of the Old Paratrooper podcast. And it is a great pleasure today to be joined with former paratrooper, former firefighter, and former tour manager for the mighty Oasis, Iain Robertson. How you doing, pal? All right?
Chris, I'm good. Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
No dramas at all. It's always a pleasure to get a fella airborne brother on the podcast. As you well know, I'm all about the reg, and I'm all about life stories and everything else, and yours fascinates me. So I'm looking forward to getting into it. What I like to do with all the podcasts is to get a bit of a background about the person, kind of where they grew up, kind of the route that they took in life. Obviously, in your case, the parachute regiment, and beyond, and then we'll just delve into it. So over to you, pal.
Well, military brat is where it starts. You know, my dad was Royal Air Force PTI, and they packed me off to Queen Victoria School, which is the military academy up in Scotland, and it is exclusively for the sons of Scottish soldiers. Then it was for the sons. Now it's for the sons and daughters. But back in the late 1800s, which is when I went to school, it was for the sons of soldiers, Scottish soldiers, sailors, and airmen. So that I suppose I was teed up, for a military career of some description. But ironically, whilst I ended up in Para-Reg, I ended up in Para-Reg because I became great friends with a Royal, a lad called Tim Tottle, and he was serving. I think he was 4-2 commando, if they still existed then. I'm not really all that clear about him because some of the commandos don't exist anymore, do they? Whether it's 4-2 or 4-5.
I think there's 40, 4-2 and 4-5 still.
Okay.
I'm pretty certain.
Okay. Well, I'm pretty certain he was 4-2 commando, and at one point he ended up in Aberdeen on the rigs, and he would disappear and reappear, and they sent him off to Belize, and he came back with a dose of dysentery. And he and I were in a nightclub in Weston-super-Mare one weekend, and he soiled himself at the bar. Anyway, I had an apartment round the corner, and he was like, and I said, "Well, go and get, just fucking go and let yourself in. Borrow a pair of my trousers." So he went back to my gaff, and I stayed at the bar. And he's 6 inches taller than me, and he's whiplash lean. He was like a middleweight boxer. And he comes back with a pair of my trousers that are fucking literally tied around the waist with a bit of string, and he's tied them up at the ankle as well, just in case he does it again. I thought this was impossibly glamorous. I thought, right, I'm having some of that. But I think perhaps because of Dad's connections, I decided I'd go Reg rather than Royal.
Good choice.
I couldn't agree more. I made the right choice at the right time, but I didn't know that then.
Look, there's no secret that there's rivalry between the Marines. I've got a lot of respect for Marines. I've got a lot of friends that are Royal Marines as well, and I think that rivalry makes the units what they are, and that makes each unit better because they're competing against the other to be top dog. And obviously, Para-Reg are top dog. So,
and the Royals know that.
They know that. Of course, they're not stupid. Well, some of them are as well, So, you end up joining up. You Depot and Aldershot. What year was this?
That was 81.
81.
November 81. I had and that was an interesting one. I had all of our DS were 3 para. So we had Mac French, some legends in here. Mac French, Tam Noble, Geordie Melling. These are names that I'm sure will resonate with some of the older members of your audience.
Tam Noble's my RSM in 2 para.
No.
Yeah,
he was a full screw when I went through Depot.
Right.
Top man, But they were outstanding. Of course, I was in Depot when 2 and 3 went down south. And we came out of Depot, the platoon before us. I was in 479 platoon, 478 platoon. All of them went down south.
Wow.
We were just that little bit too late. So although most of us had put in for 3 para, I'll be completely honest, and had been given it. But because of the dynamic around 2 and 3 being in the South Atlantic, they just said, no, it's all changed. You're all going to one para. So we literally finished depot and went a couple of days at home and straight out to join the battalion in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
While
obviously,
2 and 3 were working their magic, you know.
Yeah, it's one of them, isn't it? It was just one of the battalions didn't get to go, and it could have been any one of them, and it just so happened that we're one para, wasn't it? And I think now one para are kind of making up for that by being special forces support group, you know.
Yeah.
So fair play to them.
Yeah, I mean, it was, you know, I mean, it was, I mean, it was magical, and I really enjoyed it. Like zero heroics. I think I've said in the past, it's like being a Premier League football team or any football team or any kind of team. You can only play what they put in front of you. And in my day, there was very little going on. Is the bottom line. But I've got some great soldiering in. You know, we B Company went and did some stuff in Oman, which was awesome. And we finished off, the battalion finished off in the Allied Command Europe QRF role into Norway and the Arctic. So paratroopers on skis, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which was fucking mental. Yeah, it was. I mean, I remember basically some of the lads went off and did some sort of pre-training to become instructors. So they work with some of the lads in Hereford and some Marines from, is it Mountain? Yeah, they're mountain troopers.
Mountain leaders or MLs.
Yeah. So there was that sort of cross collaboration, and then they all came back, and then right, let's get the battalion sorted out. And so we went to Aviemore basically to learn to ski. And I remember day one, we tipped up in 4-tonners, the whole fucking battalion. You know, and they unload us at about 6 o'clock in the morning, and all the instructors are in front of us, and it's like, right, what we need beginners, right? If you've skied before, you know, we need beginners over here, we need intermediate skiers over here, and advanced skiers over here. We're like, how fucking hard can it be? 400 advanced skiers, you know what I mean? And the instructors went, fine. There's the mountain. Knock yourselves out. The next day, the 4-tonners roll in, and off we get. And people's heads are facing the wrong way. You know what I mean? And hands are hanging off. And they said, right, let's try it again. Beginners, intermediates, advanced skiers. 400 beginners. You know what I mean?
It's the Power Edge way. It's the cuffing it. It's the Power Edge way.
Yeah.
No, brilliant. So how long did you serve in one para?
A depot in 81, battalion in 82, and I was gone by 87. I was in the music industry by 87. You know, it was right. So no heroics. You know, I mean, I served with some legends, Baz Gray, you know, Blinky Blench. Al Slater was at depot when we were at depot. Ian Mackay was at depot when we were at depot. Right. But you know, I was just a Mark I Tom, really, doing what I was told to do when I was told to do it, you know.
Well, I make no secret of that as well. I was in through a bit busy time. I was in from 1997 to 2004, I went on 6 operational tours, including Sierra Leone and Afghanistan, but they weren't like the tours that the lads did in 06 onwards. And I'm completely honest about that. There was a few bits when I was in, but it wasn't like what the guys did down southern sort of Afghanistan. So, and it is what it is. You know, I was in when I was in, you were in when you were in, but we'd have gone wherever they would have sent us and done whatever they asked us to do. So exactly you just can't pick your time, can you?
And even Ireland, you know, in sort of 82, I mean, you could still get yourself into trouble, but it wasn't the 70s, you know. It wasn't the 70s. But again, you know, you can only play the team they put in front of you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you kind of 87 you left, and like you say, you kind of, how did you get into the music industry? Because it's like, I don't suppose it's that common for a former paratrooper to go into the music industry. So how did that come about?
This was one of those classic cases of it's not what you know. I served alongside of a guy in one called Viv Cook, and again, I guarantee some of your audience will be familiar with Viv. He was the prettiest man you've ever seen in your life. Okay. But he was a European full contact Lao Gar Kung Fu champion. And he was absolutely fucking lethal. Absolutely lethal. And he had a twin brother who was also a full contact Lao Gar Kung Fu champion who did not join. So Viv joins, Simon stays out. Simon's in Birmingham and he's working at a club called the Rum Runner. And he's working for a band that nobody's ever heard of. And he's just pushing boxes for them. He's doing whatever needs to be done. You know, they're not making any money. They're not selling any tickets. But they were Duran Duran.
Wow.
Who, of course, became literally the biggest band in the world practically, you know, overnight. And Simon then, because of his physical capabilities, then became head of their security team, which at that point was him. Right, their security team. Actually, there's a guy called Dave Mulder, who's ex-2 Para, funnily enough, I think came in with Simon as well. But Simon reached back to his twin brother Viv and persuaded Viv to get out the reg, and Viv got out and became part of that security cadre. And then Viv and Simon reached back to me. So I bought myself out for the princely sum of 250 quid. And I went off and I joined them, you know, to work with Duran Duran. So it was it really was pure fucking fluke. But also it was a fabulous thing because as a kid I was a music fan. So to have this opportunity, you know, I mean, it's a big decision because I thoroughly enjoyed what I was doing, and if it wasn't this, then I would have stayed in without a shadow of a doubt. You know what I mean? And possibly done 20 years. But we're into, if the dog hadn't stopped for a piss, it would have won the race. Do you know what I mean? At the end of the day, Viv left, he called me, I left, and moved on from there.
Yeah, and I'm sure you have no regrets about that. You know, by what you kind of said to me off air, sounds like you had a kind of fruitful career with some really kind of great bands and artists.
Yeah, I did. I mean, I over the course of, I think it was probably about maybe about 16 years that I did in the music industry, and you know, I worked with Duran. I worked with Duran for about a day, about an hour and a half. You know, I screwed it up completely, and they sacked me. But I kind of went on and I paid a bit more attention to what I was supposed to be doing, and I learned quickly, and I learned on the job because you have to. Back then, there weren't any formal qualifications. There are now. You know, you can go to college now and you can learn to be a tour manager. Although in truth, all you really learn is logistics, and quite frankly, truthfully, being a tour manager or heading up the security team for a rock and roll band is not complicated in terms of the nature of the job itself. And there are things that you can learn, but the difference between somebody who's good at it and sticks, and who bands then come to and reach out to, and who is continued to be employed by this band and then this band and then this band, it's people. Because rock and roll stars are tricky little suckers, you know, and of course they're young, and very often they're enjoying a huge amount of success that they're not necessarily ready for emotionally. Yeah. And it's a very interesting journey. I mean, I worked with George Harrison, obviously long after the Beatles, but I worked with George Harrison, and here's somebody who'd come out the other end. So he was just an incredibly humble human being. And a good example of that, he did some shows at the Royal Albert Hall, and I remember one afternoon, first night of those two shows that were done, and he was walking through the backstage area, and I was walking behind him. He didn't know I was behind him. I wasn't following him. We were just going in the same direction, you know, backstage. He was going to his dressing room, which he was going to see for the first time. So he arrived at his dressing room, and somebody had put up on the door his name, fair enough, George Harrison, but underneath a fucking great gold star. And he just shook his head you know, and he reached up and he peeled the star off the door. And then he clocked that I was behind him, and he just turned around and caught my eye and he went, "It's so unnecessary, Robert." He said, "We're all stars, even you." Screwed up, you know, the sticky on star and gently handed it to me and said, "Do me a favor, find a bin for that." You know what I mean? He's a really, really humble guy. So you've got that. And then you've got Liam, who, when I looked after him, which was 94 and 95, was, you know, was right at the beginning of the journey that for all of us now is well documented. You know, it was all beginning. Everything was possible. Nothing was written in the stars. They weren't, you know, they weren't the sort of global behemoth that they became in some territories. First time I went to America with them, you know, I remember we played in Salt Lake City to 6 people, right? And Noel sat outside the venue all afternoon busking just for the hell of it. Nobody knew who the hell he was. He made $1.84, right? I mean,
Wow.
It was a very, very different era. So this was before any of the craziness. I mean, there was plenty of craziness because they were crazy, but the world hadn't woken up to it. And the world was just beginning to pay attention. And that was an extraordinary thing to be around. And also, it's a great privilege to be around, because I come back to what I was saying earlier on. You know, as a kid, I was a fan, right? I mean, I was a huge, you know, I the Rolling Stones, Mick Taylor era, you know, Boland, Bowie, Roxy Music. That was my stuff, and I loved it. I was a proper music loving little kid. It's quite strange that I ended up in the parachute regiment, you know. Absolutely no regrets, but I don't think if you'd have known me at 12 years old, that would have been the prediction that you made, you know.
Yeah.
But then, what is it that John Lennon said? You know, life is what happens to us while we're busy making other plans.
No, that's true. Very, very true. I don't think a lot of people plan. You get the odd people, and I've spoken to a lot of parachute regiment veterans, and a lot of them end up in the parachute regiments almost by mistake. I'm an example of that. I was meant to join the Worcester and Sherwood Foresters, and I ended up in the parachute regiment. So,
mate, that would have been a serious fucking mistake.
Well, I know that now, but I didn't know really what the paras was about. And it was my best mate the day before was like, well, "I've done a bit of research on this unit called the paras. We're going in that," and I was like, "Well, what do they do different?" He was like, "Jump out of planes." Little did I know it was going to be slightly different. But you know, that's just kind of the way it goes, and it's you trip and stumble through, don't you? And you end up where you end up, so to speak. So yeah, so can you are you happy to name some of the other artists that you work with? Because I know my followers would be fascinated.
I mean, I started off with Duran, as I say, that lasted about a day. I made a complete pig's ear of it, and they fired me, quite rightly, by the way. And then after Duran, I went and I started working with Spandau Ballet, and that, I have to say, hats off to Simon Cook and to Viv Cook. Viv, of course, again, X1 para. Simon, you know, Simon didn't join, but Simon had already a really good reputation in live music, and was a terrific, you know, close protection expert, and he learned on the job. I mean, he wasn't taught in any way, shape, or form, though he did rub shoulders with a guy called Mick Upton. I don't know if you've heard of Mick Upton. No. So Mick Upton is X2 para, and he founded a company called Shosec. And Shosec,
I know Shosec. I do know Shosec. Yeah.
Well, Shosec are the biggest, you know, venue security and CP, one-to-one CP company, I think, in the country now. Mick Upton passed away now, sadly. So he put a hand on Simon's shoulder. But Simon got me the interview and introduced me to Spandau Ballet, and I got that job, and I made a much better job of that. And then I went out and did some stuff with Zig Zig Sputnik and the Sisters of Mercy and, you know, some of the goth bands. I did some stuff with Johnny Rotten and Public Image Limited, so I looked after Rotten for a while. George Harrison, as I said, Gary Moore, Jack Bruce, Ginger Baker, a lot of the blues artists, B.B. King, Buddy Guy, Albert Collins, John Lee Hooker, Bananarama,
right,
who party as hard as anybody you've ever stood at a bar with. I tell you, those girls are absolutely mental. Yeah. We were in Tokyo, actually. I was in Tokyo with Oasis, and the girls were in Tokyo at the same time. Anyway, Karen phoned me up because she saw the band were in town and she knew I was working with them. And she said, "Listen, you know, Sarah and I are in Tokyo. Can we come to the show?" "Of course you can. I'll put you on the list." So I put the girls on the list, and they came to the show and they hung out afterwards. And it's quite funny, actually, because this would have been, I think, 94 probably, or very, very early 95. And so the band was still finding their way. And of course, Karen and Sarah are very, very comfortable in the pop star role, right? Because they've been doing it for a long time, and also very, very confident. So they swan backstage and start getting into the Oasis rider, you know, and the boys are like, they're like schoolboys at a dance. Do you know what I mean? They're like, fucking hell, who's this? Who's this? Anyway, if everybody has a drink and the guard comes down, and it transpires that we all go out together. So we're in this club in Roppongi in Tokyo. And Noel comes up to me at 5 o'clock in the morning. "Yeah, Robbo," and apologies for the shitmank accent. "Yeah, Robbo, fucking get me out of here. Them girls are gonna fucking kill me."
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible. You kind of never would have put Bananarama and the Gallaghers together, would you?
It was. I think they're great mates now. I believe they're great mates, and it makes perfect sense. What a lot of people don't know about Bananarama is, I'm sure, because nobody pays that much attention, they started off as like an art rock band, you know, hanging out with Terry Hall from the Specials. The Sex Pistols gave them a room above their rehearsal studios to live when the girls didn't have a pot to piss in. So they were really a part of a very edgy and very sort of serious music scene before they became, you know, the biggest female pop group of all time at one point. You know, their record sales outdid the Supremes. I mean, they were still are absolutely huge. Anyway, I worked with Bananarama, and they were great fun. A band called the Choir Boys. Some of your listeners have probably heard of them, but a long list, you know, a long list.
Yeah. God, like I said to you before. Yeah, no, like I said to you before, that is a kind of a proper list of, you know, of artists that you work with, and you don't get kind of blasé about it. I like just one of them names that you've thrown out there. I'm like, wow. Do you know what I mean?
I wasn't blasé at the beginning, and this is why I got sacked. You know, I mean, my first gig with Duran, and it was actually Arcadia. By the time I came out, they were Arcadia, and that was Simon and Roger and Nick, because of course John and Andy had gone off and formed the Power Station with what's his name, Robert Palmer. So they were in Paris making a record, and it was Nick Rhodes' 25th birthday or late 20th, one of his birthdays. And he had it at a place called Darves in Paris. Anyway, on the guest list that night, Mick Jagger, Ronnie Wood, Grace Jones, Sting. I mean, you know, and this is my first night on the job, right?
Wow.
And Simon, we're in his hotel room, and he's like, "Right, I'm going to give you a float for tonight. You know, just if you need to get drinks in for guests, you know, don't hesitate. We're you know, the band are hosting this, and they want to make sure everybody gets looked after." This is, you know, mid to late 87. He gave me 10,000 francs, right?
Wow.
And I'm like, "What the fuck do I need?" He said, "Listen," he said, "you'll spend all of it." Anyway, he decided that night, moving people around, we were going to drive. So me, Viv, and Simon were going to drive. We had 3 leased Jaguar XJ6s, and we were driving the sort of great and the good from one place to another. And I think I had Ronnie Wood's wife in my car, and maybe Grace Jones, you know, maybe Simon or Simon's wife, Yasmin. And Simon was ahead of me, and you know, he's got Jagger, and you know what I mean. It's like 3 cars full of some of the biggest names in rock and roll. And I got all reg. I thought it would be the funniest thing in the world. Okay, right? I thought it would be the funniest thing in the world if I gently pushed my vehicle up behind Simon's vehicle, and again, gently, right, perfect clutch control, nudged him maybe 6 or 7 inches into oncoming traffic, fucking hilarious, right? My foot slipped on the clutch.
No.
I piled into the back of his Jag. It was like an RTC, basically. I sent him about 8 feet into oncoming traffic and came close to killing them all. So they've all spun around in the car and they're looking at me, right? And all I've got in that situation is manic laughter. And the next morning, Simon calls me in and he says, Robbo, I've got a bit of bad news for you, mate. He said, you failed the world's easiest interview process, and I've got to send you back to the UK, which is perfectly fine. You know, I wasn't ready for it. You know, that basically Simon employed a moron, and they quite rightly sacked the moron. You know.
Well, the first mistake there was probably giving you 10,000 francs as a freshly out of the. I thought it was going to take a turn of. I ended up absolutely steaming off the 10,000 francs.
That's it. The dance of the flaming arseholes in front of Jagger. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that'd have gone down well, wouldn't it? You might have enjoyed that. You never know.
Next time.
But yeah, no, God. But look, it's one of them, and you're young. It seemed like a great idea at the time. In hindsight, perhaps not the best idea.
Not the best. It was not the best idea I've ever had, and I'd love to say I learned from my mistakes, but I've had a few other crap ideas since then. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we all do. So, kind of, did that put a little bit of a black mark against your name, so to speak?
Well,
we're getting into the music industry again.
I'm not sure that it did. I mean, I wasn't on anybody's radar for it to put a black mark on. You know,
right? I get that.
And as I say, Simon then brokered firstly introductions with Spandau Ballet, and then a proper job interview with them, and they gave me that opportunity, and I wasn't stupid enough to not realize what it was I'd done, and really what was required, and then you just got to go, okay, I need to take another run at this, and there's probably a different approach, you know what I mean, to organizing a car crash.
Yeah,
I mean they'll organize all the car crashes and train crashes you need. Rock and roll bands on the road are a car crash. You know, they are a train wreck, and you know, your job really is to kind of pick up the pieces, not start the fucking accident. You know.
Yeah, no, true. So, what, like, again, for the people kind of that are watching this who don't really know what, I know obviously you manage a tour, but what does that entail when you're a tour manager?
Well, as a tour manager, you'll be a part of the team long before the tour goes out. You'll liaise with the band's management, who in turn will have liaised with their record label, agents and promoters to book a tour. And they will then present you pretty much with, this is when the tour begins in 3 months' time, perhaps 6 months' time, depending on the complexity of the tour, size of it. And you will then begin pulling all of the various strands together. So you will begin employing the crew that are going to travel. Now, some of those decisions have been made for you, because in most instances, most bands, established bands, have got an established crew. So you know who your front of house sound engineer is going to be, and you know who your monitor engineer is going to be, and you know who your lighting engineers are going to be, and who your front of house lighting guy is going to be. You know, you get a production manager, and that's probably written in the stars as well. But there'll be some gaps that need filling, and it'll be down to you to work through, you know, your own connections, or just reaching out. Does anybody know of a really good electrician, rigger, because we need this role filling. You know, you'll also contract the trucking company. You'll contract all of the accommodation arrangements. But that's pretty straightforward, because there are a handful of travel agents who specialize in the live music sector. And so you'll go to one of those agents, and you will quite literally just give them your tour itinerary, and they will then come back to you, and you'll give them a budget, and they'll then come back to you with a set of accommodation solutions that works based on, you know, wherever it is you're supposed to be and whenever you're supposed to be there. And they'll do that for you globally, usually. But then you also, you know, it also falls to you to coordinate all travel arrangements. And in the main, that will probably be a tour bus. If you're in the States, you might choose to fly because of the distances involved.
Yeah.
But you'll make those decisions. So effectively, it's almost like drawing up a set of orders for battle. You know, you look at your resources, you look at what you're trying to achieve, and you augment those resources where you can and where it's necessary, and then you effectively create that logistical plan.
Stressful?
No, not at that stage, not really, because you know that you are weeks, months away from actually the rubber hitting the road. You'll start to get an inkling of what press requirements are going to be laid upon you over the course of the tour, and then it starts getting a bit more real. And that also falls to you when you're on the road. The bits and bobs, the technical element of the shows will be handled largely by your production manager. So this is the guy that speaks lighting, that speaks sound, that speaks tech. You know, as a road manager, tour manager, you will be responsible for bands' movements. You'll be responsible for press and promotion, and you'll be responsible for settling the shows. Now, in my day, settling the show could be settling the show in cash.
Right.
These days, it's changed dramatically, and I would be amazed if, let's take the Oasis shows that are coming up next year. I would be amazed if as much as 75% of the amount of money that they're supposed to make isn't already in their bank account before they step on a stage somewhere for the entire tour.
Really?
Yeah, because how those shows will be structured is they will be offered a guarantee for the tour. So the promoter will have come to them and said, here are the shows I want you to do, and this is how much I promise you I'm going to pay you. And then there'll be a conversation about sort of percentage break bonuses when you do particularly well and you sell as Oasis are doing and have done, you know. But back in my day, you could arrive at a show with nothing paid for that particular gig, you know, and
Right.
then you've got some interesting decisions to make. Most interesting of all is, am I putting the band on stage? Right? There's zero.
Yeah.
I got no. Most of the time, you would have 50% upfront, and the management company would have told you we're good. They paid us a 50% deposit, do the show, settle it at the end. And so at the end, I'll sit down in a little room somewhere. We'll look at the numbers. We'll look at the expenditure that they can prove to me that went out for promotion. That is an expense that comes out of what we would expect to take from the show, and we start getting into the nuances of percentage break, and a number is agreed, and then in my day, usually cash.
Wow. Yeah. Times have changed, haven't they?
I did a band called Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and we were in Italy, and we hadn't been paid. For 4 or 5 shows, and the guarantee was pretty grown up, you know, because they were big shows, 10,000 capacity. And I reached back after we hadn't been paid for 2 to the band's management, and I'm like, I'm really uncomfortable with this because Italy's a bit flaky anyway, you know, when you're doing live music. And the promoter, a guy called Francesco Sanavia, was proper mafia, you know. And the and the management company came back and said, Steve Barnett, he came back and said, no, it's great because Francesco has the band's distribution rights in Italy, and he's not going to screw that over. We will get paid. Anyway, sure enough, I get a call. I'm still knocking on their door every day going, where's the money? Where's the money? I get a call from Francesco. He says, can you be at the, and we're in Venice. He said, can you be at the water taxi point at 5 o'clock in the morning? Well, yeah, okay. You know, so I turn up, and this is beautiful. So it's 5 o'clock in the morning. There's a like an 18th, you know, a 19th century London mist hanging, right? And this water taxi rocks up with 3 clear experts in thuggery and muggery. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, so I get in the taxi with these boys, and off we go, and we pull in to a little kind of, it wasn't really a car park, it was like a building site, right? That we somehow had access to with the boat. And there's a Mercedes, a stretch Mercedes there, right? And the engine's running, and they put me in the back of the Merc. There's some other huge geezer in there, right, with a briefcase. Briefcase has got $500,000 US in it.
Wow, that
So,
doesn't sound shady at all, does it?
yeah, do you know what I mean? And so, you know, do you know how long it takes to count $500,000?
I can imagine quite a while, especially being Power Reg and not being able to count.
Yeah, I had to keep starting again. 1, 2. Oh, what comes next? Listen, if I was a royal, I'd still be there.
Brilliant. Yeah, that is kind of different kind of world, isn't it? And you know, what year we're talking about? Is that 80s or 90s?
That would have been Emerson, Lake and Palmer would have been 90s, very early 90s. Yeah, it's changed now. It's beyond all recognition. You know, just as banking has become digital and automated, so have all of the communications and quite frankly, any band of any standing, they're just not. They're not going to get in the taxi or the limo on day one unless they know the money, as per the contracted agreement, is already sitting in the bank.
Yeah, no, fair play. And I suppose that gives them some sort of almost insurance policy there. If they have been paid, I suppose there's a bit more of a chance that they're not going to pull out, because then they'll have to give the money back. I don't know if that works the other way as well.
Well, it's really interesting actually. The artist will have a contract, and there'll be some very limited parameters around which they can cancel, or the show can be cancelled without any loss of funds to the band. One of the shadiest is something called the proof of intent to play. And I'll give you a really good example of that. Whitney Houston was contracted to perform a corporate gig for Toyota. I'm going to say allegedly here, because I don't need fucking Whitney Houston's lawyers. Rest in peace, Whitney. But she flew in from Los Angeles. She was contracted to do 2 corporate shows at €1 million a show, so 2 million euros. She flew in from Los Angeles to Paris. The shows were in Brussels. And in Paris, she went to a tame doctor who gave her a sick note. Because she'd flown from LA to Paris, that was proof of intent to perform.
Wow.
So she missed the first show, took the €1 million. She did deliver the second show, but she delivered, I mean, this was right at the end of her career. And it was, I mean, I was there, and it was like, fucking hell. She ended the show, I no word of a lie, curled up in a ball, shaking on the stage, with the chief operating officer of Toyota Motor Europe nervously approaching her with a bouquet of flowers, going, Whitney, is everything okay? You know, it was an absolute train wreck. But of course, you know, a lot's been written subsequently about the condition, sadly, that she found herself with, you know, with Class A narcotics. But the point I'm making is that first show was missed because of the proof of intent to play, which was actually just got off an aeroplane in Paris and went to a tame doctor and got a sick chitty, you know.
Wow. Yeah, that is just crazy, isn't it?
Isn't
And
it?
it's like,
Yeah, it's a mad,
yeah,
it's a mad world. But back to the duties of a road manager, tour manager. You know, then the key issue then, apart from getting paid on behalf of the band, which now is a very simple thing, or certainly a lot more simple than it was back in the day. You'll coordinate all of the press and promotion as well, and that can be, and that changes. That's a, you know, that's an ever moving feast, because if the band are hot, then every single day somebody else wants to get on that bandwagon. You know, another 15 people want a photo pass. You know, another journal from God knows where around the world. Because again, you need to remember that rock and roll bands are global, is a global offering, right? We look at what goes on in the UK, and but when you're absolutely having it, then everybody wants to talk to you all of the time. You know, and
yeah,
that makes for a busy day.
yeah, I can imagine. And like I say, it's varying levels of kind of popularity. You know, some of the bands you've named, and there's some I've not heard of, but
Yeah,
obviously
yeah, yeah.
Duran Duran, Spandau Ballet, there'd probably be more, obviously a lot more logistical and a lot more work to do with certain bands as there were. Is there any you kind of turned down because you just thought that's too much, that,
No,
or the band had a bad reputation, or
no, I've never. I've been very, very lucky actually, and I've been lucky because all of the bands that I've worked with, even those, and some of them I didn't know much about before I started working with them, but I've really enjoyed both them as people and much more importantly, their music. One exception to that, I have to say, sadly, is Emerson, Lake and Palmer, because that whole kind of mental prog rock stuff leaves me cold. You know what I mean? So that was a challenge, but outside of that, both the bands and the music that they make have been pretty much a joy to be around. And I am going to come back to privilege and blessing. You know, I mean, it's if when you're a kid, you know, your first love is football, and you end up as, for what, you know, the coach manager of a Premier League team, right? Or if your first love is rugby and you ain't quite got the tools to be a professional rugby player or football player, whatever, but you end up really close to that world. That's second best, and it's pretty fine actually, you know. So, you know, very, very lucky, and I won't pretend for a second that, you know, arseholing about around the world with rock and roll stars is anything other than fun, regardless of how stressful it might be from time to time. It's fun, you know.
well, if you get to kind of, you said there, you kind of got to party a bit with kind of the Gallagher brothers. Now I'm an absolutely huge Oasis helped. I was 14 in
Wow.
1994. So 1994, I'm 14. I'm just discovering music, and then Oasis burst onto the scene. So as you can imagine, like I am. Like Oasis for me, I've tried to get tickets, I didn't get them. And it's funny actually, my lad is 14 now, and he's just discovered them on the kind of return. So I was trying to get tickets, but like everyone else, I was queuing for God. I was queuing to get into Ticketmaster
Yeah,
to get. So it was just, I
yeah.
knew it was going to be chaos when they kind of reformed, and I suppose that leads me on to kind of my next question. How have you kind of, what do you think to the reforming of kind of Oasis? Did you
I
expect it to be as kind of big as it
Yes.
is?
Now that it's happened, what I didn't expect, I would love to suggest that I saw it coming. Right? I didn't. So I won't, you know, I won't make any pretensions that I know more than the next person about what's going on in their universe. And the bottom line is, let's not forget that the band that I knew existed in 94 and 95, and there's an awful lot of toxic water passed under a few burning bridges since then, and they're very different human beings. But I didn't think it would happen until they announced it. And then you go, of course, because what are they actually commemorating? They're commemorating, when they go out in 2025, they will be commemorating Definitely Maybe and What's the Story. And Noel, in recent interviews, has said and confessed really that everything that the band did post those two records never quite lived up to that level of excellence. So they're celebrating those two albums, quite possibly two of the greatest albums of all time. And what Oasis did, and again, my time with them was 94, 95. And I think that's miraculous, because I actually think that's the best time with any band. At the beginning, where nothing is written in the stars, but it's all happening. And every day something new and something bigger, and the excitement and the energy it's crazy to be around. It really is. But what they did, they released Definitely Maybe, which is I don't have to tell you, you're a fan. It's an unbelievable record. Their live shows then, I mean, breathtaking. That level of anger, that level of desire, that level of energy, and edginess, and all of their dreams have not yet come true, right? And they're spitting that into a small room. That is a promise. That record and the band live, that's a promise to the world, right? And it's a big promise. And then they release What's the Story, and they keep the promise.
Yeah.
And that's huge.
Absolutely.
And so few bands do that. So few bands do that. That difficult second album weren't that fucking difficult for Noel,
Yeah, it's and I'm a big fan of them both. I listen to kind of the Noel style, and I'd have to kind of probably say I've swung more toward Noel's style of music, but both of them individually, I've seen them both kind of individually. And as I was lucky enough to see Oasis in, I think, just before they split up at Heaton Park, so I was very, very blessed to have seen them. So, but like I say, it would have been nice to see them. I'm going to keep trying down the road, and hopefully more events. Do you think they'll make any more music? Do you think they'll bring out any albums or stuff?
If you want to know what's in Liam and Noel's head, see if you can get Pep Guardiola on your podcast.
It'd be nice.
You know what I mean? Because he's probably more clued in about what they're going to do next than anybody else is. I've got no idea. True. I've got no idea. Ask me if they should. I mean, that's a tricky one, because if they do, it's going to be held to account, and quite rightly, and it's going to be held up next to everything that's gone before. And actually, what's it going to be held up next to? Definitely Maybe, and What's the Story? And they're big boots to fill,
They are definitely.
What do I know? Seriously, what do I know?
So, are you still in the music industry now in any shape?
Yeah, I am sort of. If you ask me nicely, then I'll go out and do a bit. I'm sort of semi-retired, really. Last year I went out. Mark Ullman's got a little side hustle called The Loveless, which is like a garage band thing, and it's Mark and it's Neil X, who's Mark's musical director, but was also one of the founding members of Zig Zig Sputnik, and it's Iggy Pop's rhythm section, So it's this filthy garage rock and roll band, and they did a little tour at the back end of last year, and Mark reached out and asked if I'd tour manage that. Absolutely, love the music, and it's only a couple of weeks' work. Love to do it. Neil X still goes out and does a few bits and pieces. I do the odd festival with him. And there's an artist, and here's one for anybody listening, and you as well. I mentor an artist called Alex Lipinski. He's absolutely brilliant.
I've seen him on social media. I have seen some of his stuff on social media. I'm pretty certain.
He's absolutely brilliant. Now, he's worked with Bonehead. Bonehead and he put a little project together called The Phonies and the Freaks, which it's terrific. And give him a listen. So I mentor Alex. Alex says I manage him, but he's an unsigned artist. There's nothing to manage. Do you know what I mean? I think of it more as mentoring, and God knows I haven't made a penny out of it. But so I still do a bit,
Yeah, well, it point him in the direction of the Old Paratrooper podcast, so I can, if he wishes to come on and talk to boring old me, I'd gladly have him on.
Okay, yeah, for sure, yeah.
Happy days. So obviously, what you continued, and that leads me on. Obviously, the music kind of stuff aside, which is obviously an amazing career in itself. But then you kind of you were involved with the fire service as well, weren't you?
when my son was born, I kind of realized you cannot be, in my opinion, some people pull it off, but not many. You can't be a proper dad and gallivanting around the world with rock and roll stars. You know, you can't do it. So I kind of slowly, well, actually not that slowly, quite quickly drew it all to a close. And then it was like, what am I going to do now? And I was living up in Gloucestershire at the time, and I saw an advert for fire and rescue, and it was 80% actually of Gloucestershire's fire and rescue, and I think this is largely true nationally, is retained. You know,
Yeah,
so
it wouldn't surprise me.
it was a retained position at in Gloucestershire at a place called Winchcombe. So I went along for that and was successful, and actually, and again, the fire service was changing even then, and this would have been like sort of 99, you know, 2000, 99, 2000. We had one watch commander, two crew commanders. Two crew commanders had not done competency. And for those that don't understand, it's, you know, competency is a it's a test, isn't it? It's a selection process where you prove that you are capable of incident command and a whole shitload of other you know, critical information, that you hold that critical information on road traffic collision, on you know, on firefighting in all its various guises. You know, you basically, you pass an exam and show that you can do the job. So they'd never done competency, and they'd never done competency because the station was on its arse and they barely had enough firefighters to get the truck out the door.
Right.
And so at that point, you know, FRS Glossfire were like, we need a, you know, a really aggressive recruitment drive to get some bodies in, but we also need to fill the incident command positions. We need crew commanders, and actually, although Borney and Woody had not done competency, they'd been part of the station for 10, 12 years, right? They took the job on, didn't want to take the job on, took the job on, and then they did it, and they did it really well. And then the service came to them and said, actually, thanks very much. We've got the numbers there now. So if you want to continue as crew commanders, you need to go back retrospectively and do the work that you were supposed to do, but we didn't ask you to do because we needed your help. Borney, you know, he's like, that's just not my bag, you know. And so I'm gonna throw my hat in the ring. I'm out. I'll just dress back to being a firefighter. Consider me out. Woody was like, I'll give it a go. Anyway, long story short, it ain't Woody's cup of tea either, and the whole kind of competence process, and you'll know it, of having to write, you know, specific answers in a specific way, proving that you pretty much quote, you know, this or that FRS handbook about this or that. It was too much for him. So suddenly there were two crew commander roles that needed filling. And the watch commander asked me if I'd take a, because my plan, I mean, you know, you think about it, in 99, I was 49 years old. So my ambitions were genuinely, I'll be a safe pair of hands in the back. That's it, index. But I was, you know, I was persuaded to go for crew command, and I'm all right at paperwork. And so I was successful. And then there was a similar set of circumstances for the watch commander role, and I got that as well. Too early, but I was smart enough to understand what I didn't understand.
Yeah.
And I leaned very heavily on Woody, on Borney, on, you know, Mike Horton, who had 22 years in. You know what I mean? You look back behind you and you'd see who was in the truck, and you go, okay, I don't need to know everything. You know, I'll nail that kind of, you know, I'll nail the DRA, I'll nail the analytical, you know, I'll nail all that process stuff. But I've got some really strong opinions here. When we're first in attendance, I've got some really strong opinions here that I can fall back on. I've got some smarter men than me, and some smarter women than me that who I can lean on, and I did, and that was really the only way forward.
Yeah, well, it's the team. You all bring strengths and weaknesses to a team. It's a well-known fact, and you kind of that's why the team. It's important for the teamwork. But you coming into that role as watch commander, it's not like you're 21-year-old wet
No,
behind the ears
no.
that have not had no life. You've been in the military, which does go a long way. We know that. And obviously you're a bit older, you've seen the world, you've experienced it, and that counts for quite a lot. And what you kind of probably lack there in experience, you'd have picked up in worldly knowledge and been able to and I've always said a good commander will always turn to the people in the back and get their opinion, whereas you get bad commanders or bad OICs or bad watch managers, whatever you want to call them in different services, that will be like, no, it's my way. And that is very, very dangerous than probably being incompetent in my book.
Yeah. It's a weird one, that the manager commander thing. We changed, I think, about 4 times in while I was in. When I started there, we were watch managers. Then we got a new chief fire officer, a guy called John Hall, who was quite wary, and he said, no, you're going to be commanders, you know what I mean? And then then another CFO came in, and no, it's an administrative role, you're going to be managers again, you know what I mean?
Same role, different name.
Nothing changed, right? Except the job title. But yeah, I mean, I leaned heavily operationally. I leaned heavily on the resource that was in the truck, but I did have the to steal from the sporting arena. I had the dressing room. That
is the thing, and I say this all the time. This kind of leaders and then there's managers, and the weird bit is you don't have to be all screamy and shouty, and if you have to be like that, then you've not really got the respect of your crew. And we always say it, having a calm commander, watch manager, whatever you want to call it, that knows his stuff and that you respect goes a long way. And sadly, there's still quite a lot in all services that get that bit wrong. And there are certain people that should never be in charge of a paperclip, never mind a fire engine, and it is, and it does. It makes me kind of and the people you would have encountered them throughout your career in life, the people that you think you shouldn't be in charge of anything because it goes to your head, and that's dangerous as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I was good at pretending to be calm. I always knew that whatever was going on in here, I couldn't allow it to project. And I remember the first time that the weight of responsibility became clear to me. I was a firefighter, and we went out to. Technically it was an RTC. A vehicle had come off a road at speed because they were going too quickly, and the camber of that road was notorious. They come off the road and they'd literally gone through a petrol forecourt, petrol station forecourt, while there were vehicles in the forecourt, and this was an old country and a young man filling a car up. When they went literally through. This vehicle went through the petrol pumps, so severing their connection with the roof. Took the kid out who was filling up the vehicle that was parked there. Sent him 80, 100 feet up the road. Somehow or another, and you'll have seen this in RTCs. The just the weirdness of it sometimes.
Yeah.
The car had been cut open down the side. Right, and it opened like a clamshell while it was in the air. I'll say person. I don't want to give any clues. The person driving was thrown out of the car, and the car then shut. All of this has happened at great speed, obviously. So it's basically cut them in half.
Wow.
Right, and then down the road. It's on our doorstep. It was 5-minute run away. even though it was a retained pump, we were really quick out of the door. I mean, we were quicker than some whole time pumps. So we're on the road in probably 3 minutes. No, I'll finish the story, then I'll tell you another lovely anecdote about that. Anyway, so we're first pump in attendance, and we're way ahead of Cheltenham, who are coming in behind us, way ahead of them. We know that. And Woody is OIC, still a crew commander at the time. And I remember him getting off the pump when we arrived, and I remember seeing all of the civvies and the look, and it's like, you're going to fix everything. and I'm thinking, this ain't fixable, you know. And I realized in that instant the weight on his shoulders.
Yeah,
the weight on his shoulders.
Yeah, there's a lot to kind of take on board and digest, and you get that, like you say, from the members of public. There's that kind of what's it called? It's called something, isn't it? Where they kind of yeah. I forget the name of it.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Where they kind of expecting you to do something, and you're like, right, okay. Like you say, they're not always fixable, are they?
No, they're not. They're not. I mean, I remember one incident, and I instructed one of the crew to perform chest compressions on somebody who I knew, because it was about being seen to try and do something.
Yeah.
It would have been very easy to just go severely, walk away. But I'm like, no, just go and try. I know you're flogging a dead horse, but do, and I'll worry about all the other stuff going on. But back to the speed out the door. When I first got my my alerter, the watch commander said, he said, if it's a night shout, you'll never catch it. I said, what do you mean? He said, no. He said, you live too far away. He said, and the one thing about this pump is we're double speedy out the door. I thought, I'll fucking show you, you know. So the first time my alerter went at night, about 2 o'clock in the morning, I was pretty much fully dressed, and I had been. Do you know what I mean? Ever since they put that alerter in my hand, and I'm out the door like greased weasel shit, and I'm hurtling. I'm only 3 minutes away. And as I'm heading down past the school, the truck's going past me on blues and twos, and I'm like, "What the?" You know what I mean? I mean, they were, man. They were pretty slick. Anyway.
Yeah, the moral pressure was the word I was looking for.
That's it. Yeah, completely.
Yeah, but no, it's no secret that the whole time give the retained a bit of stick and a bit of banter and everything else. But I've always been completely honest. I not tell them that, but we have a lot of respect for the retained, because to hold down a normal job and then put yourself on call when you're at home and in your personal time and at night, and to continue doing that is one hell of a commitment to do. And I don't think personally I could do it. I'm obviously whole time, but I couldn't do the retain, because you give up a lot, and I don't think people realize that you give up a lot of your free time to help your community. And we all know the fire service is not amazing money, and certainly not for retained as well. You know, it's almost like a kind of top up of wages, as it is.
No, it is. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Oh, that's good. How long did you do on the fire service?
Again, I got in at 99, and then I was gone 2020. But it didn't end. It didn't end particularly well. You know, it was. I unfortunately walked away with a PTSD, you know, diagnosis, and it was. And I have to say, if you'd have asked me a year before, I'd have said there's no such thing.
Yeah, it's look, I make no secret of it that the kind of, obviously I'm trying to kind of raise the awareness for that all things mental health, but obviously PTSD, because of our backgrounds are very, very similar with the military and the fire service. And as I said to you off air, you know, we both probably know a lot of people in both those industries that have suffered with PTSD and sadly taken their own life. And it is, and I've been a little bit blasé about it in the past. And I understand it better now, but I'd be a bit like, how's he got PTSD? and be a bit critical of it and be
Mm.
like, what's he done? I don't understand. And just because something doesn't affect me, it doesn't mean it's not going to affect others or vice versa. I've said this numerous times, but you never know, do you? And we always liken it to kind of like a jug being filled up. And at some point, that jug's going to overfill, and it's how you kind of deal with it, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. And I don't think there's any other word for it than cynical, to be truthful. And until I was on the receiving end of it, you know. And yeah, I mean, I'm you know, it's some great soldiering in Para-Reg, but never really put at risk, particularly beyond, you know, beyond the reality of the soldiering. I mean, the Arctic was interesting, obviously. I mean, technically, you're at risk on a daily basis, as they explained to us. It's the only environment in the world that's trying to kill you 24/7 if you don't switch on, you know. But there was nobody shooting at us.
Yeah. What can you pinpoint the incident that? I mean, I'm not expecting you to kind of expand on it if you don't want to, but can you pinpoint the incident that kind of almost triggered?
Yeah, it was, and it wasn't on the day, and it wasn't on the day after, and it was just one of those. Well, you know yourself that you know you'll attend multiple incidents that you'd rather you hadn't. And I had always found it very easy to put them in the rear view mirror, you know, and walk away from them and just think, well, okay, you know, we weren't responsible for happy ever after, but we made it better. And I always believed that our arrival makes things, we improve the situation, don't resolve it every time. Most of the time, I think you probably do most of the time, right? Most of the time, it is almost happy ever after. Somebody's got a broken car, you know. There's a fire that nearly happened, but you got there double quick, you know, and then occasionally it goes south. But you realise, well, we did our job, and we left things better than we found them, and I was always able to put it behind me. But this one I did actually for several months. It was an RTC, and it was right on our doorstep again. The same road actually. Which was notorious. And again, you'll know this. There are certain places when they tell you there's been an RTC, and you think I know exactly where that is, you know. And the report was female driver and head-on collision with a tree, heart stopped beating. That's what we got on the turnout sheet. So we turn up and it's exactly that, you know, the vehicle has come off the road because it was going too quickly, simple as, you know, it was pilot error, head straight into a tree. The speedo read 70 miles an hour. So how far she was going when she hit the brakes, I have absolutely no idea. But at the point of impact, they were doing 70 miles an hour. So, you know, we deployed, and obviously, you know, our role is casualty stabilization and extrication. We did that, and we had a lot of additional resource turning up. You know, ambulances. We had specialist paramedics. We had a team on its way from Birmingham because nothing in the county had the Gucci gear that was going to deal with whatever the fuck it was that we loaded into the back of an ambulance. You know. And so our job was done, and you know, I'd instructed the crew to make up the equipment, and at this point there were a lot of vehicles that had kind of accrued and were being held up. It was an early evening thing, and the police who turned up weren't doing their job. They hadn't closed it down. They hadn't cordoned it off properly. So there were a lot of rubberneckers, and I thought, right, I'm going to sort this out, because I've never been a believer in personal tragedy as a spectator sport, particularly, you know. And I'm in the process of doing that. And Woody came up to me on this one. I'm incident commander, and he's firefighter now. And he's just said to me, he said, Robert, I think that's Geordie over there. And I've looked over and watching, you know, and at this point, we've handed over to the paramedics. They still haven't put her in the ambulance because they needed to stabilize her a lot more than we've been able to do, you know. So they're still working on her by the side of the road. And there's a few civvies watching on, and I wanted to sort that out. But Geordie's there. He's a mate of ours. And I thought, right, I'm going to have a word. I'm actually going to go and give him a bollocking, you know. So I walked up to him and I just said, you know, what are you doing? And he just looked at me and he just said, that's my little girl. And yeah, and
well,
yeah, and I sort of put my arms around him, and he fell apart, and probably for about 25 minutes. And he's a big lad. He's like you know what I mean? But for about 25 minutes, he's just bawling. You know? And anyway, it all reconciled itself. She made it onto an ambulance alive, and she made it to an intensive care specialist trauma unit in Birmingham, Queen Elizabeth Hospital, is it? Anyway, at 4 o'clock in the morning, Geordie had to make the decision to turn the machines off. And at 8 o'clock in the morning, he rang me up, and he rang me up to say thank you for our role in the incident. And I just remember thinking, well, thanks for what, you know? But still, I felt that I'd walked away from it. It was devastating, and it was you know, it was very personal. But I thought I'd walked away, and it just transpired over the coming months that I hadn't, you know. And it just kept coming back.
I think again, you know, and you would have dealt with multiple incidents over that 29-year period that you was in the fire service, and you know,
I wasn't 29. It was about 9 years. It was about 9-10 years. 99 till.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
9-10 years. You know, similar sort of time. I've been in 11 years. I've dealt with multiple incidents, RTCs, probably like yourself, and it isn't. When it's a member of the public, it's still harsh, but because you don't know and have no connection to that person, it tends to be not as bad. Now we all probably have an incident that we remember and we think about, but when there's a connection, and the connection clearly was the daughter of a crew member, then that makes it difficult for everyone, doesn't it? And you know, it's that human connection that you've got with the what's happening in front of you, I guess.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and you know, that's also one of the perhaps unspoken considerations of retain. It's very often somebody you know,
because you work in that area,
right? Because you are a community firefighter, and you are serving your community. Now, if you get called in, you know, as the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th pump to something in Gloucester or something in Cheltenham or whatever, then okay, there's a distance. But usually, we would tip it out to somebody we knew.
Yeah.
Not very often from the point of view, but there were a couple of RTCs where we knew the people involved, and they didn't end particularly well. And they were, but most of the, if not all, of the house fires that we attended, or the commercial fires that we attended, somebody on the truck knew somebody connected with that family, you know.
Yeah, that happens, and I think that is, you're right there, that it is something that's forgot about. I work in an area that's maybe 20 minutes away from where I live, but obviously I can't, you know, I come into this area if I'm sometimes second pump to this area if that happens. But you know, when you're a retained firefighter, you are serving usually small villages and small towns where everybody knows everyone. And like you say,
absolutely. I remember we turned out to a commercial fire, and it was they were joiners, or woodworkers and joiners. And this was one of those that we got tipped out to once every 2 months. You know what I mean? And it was always something or nothing. It was usually a bin fire. One of their bins was smouldering. And so as we travelled, that's exactly what we expected. As we came over the top of the hill and looked down, flames were 40, 50 feet in the air. You know, the whole thing had gone. Yeah. You know what I mean? And this was a family and this was like the 22nd of December, right?
Wow.
And they had all of their kids' Christmas presents hidden in their business premises rather than around the houses. And you get a lot of that. You know, you get a lot of that.
Yeah, it's how many times did they come in, like you say, they come out on the turnout slip, it's a make safe at an RTC, and you get there and there's 5 people trapped, or you know, it's a house fire, there's no one inside, you get there and it's carnage. And so we always take what's on the turnout slip with a pinch of salt until we get there, you know. That's the way it goes, isn't it? But no, so obviously you finished in the fire service, and then did you kind of take a step back after that when you finished? Or what did you go into after?
Well, it was forced upon me. I was living up in Gloucestershire at the time, and I visited, as you do. I just came down to visit my mum, see how she was, and I spent a long weekend with her. And I just had she would have been 85, and I just had a sense that all was not entirely well, and so I spent a bit of time. I visited her regularly, and became confident that it was more than just forgetfulness.
Yeah.
And what transpired is that she was into the early stages of dementia, Alzheimer's, and it transpired that, I'd finished with fire and rescue, or it had finished with me, whichever way you want to look at it. And I found myself as her primary carer for a couple of years, and as the dementia became, more pronounced, and there's only one direction of travel. There's no reverse gear. You know where the story ends. You know how the story ends. There's absolutely no happy ever after. And anyway, Mum passed away December of last year, and that was, it was only then that I was able to really pull focus on sorting myself out, and actually facing up to the PTSD and dealing with it, really gripping it and dealing with it.
Yeah, and well, you say you're on top of it now.
I've been very lucky. I'm part of the Worcestershire and Hereford PRA, Parachute Regiment Association, and this was put together by a guy called Pete Elcock. Pete did, I think he did 30 years in total, some of which was careers. He was running a careers office in Worcester, the back end of it, but he served in one para. I think he served in all the battalions and 15, and anyway, he put the PRA together, and there were 4 of us initially, and for years actually there were 4 of us. It was just 4 people down the pub, right? It was Pete Elcock, it was Len Carver from 3 para, who picked up a gunshot wound at Mount Longdon. So we talk about you can only play the team in front of you. My attitude towards my experience in para reg is, well, I was no fucking hero, but I walked alongside of a couple, and Len certainly, and Len Baines, also 3 para, also went down south, Pete and myself. So it was 4 blokes in a pub. COVID came along. Post-COVID, when the world opened up again, we went, in the course of about 4 months, from 4 people in a pub to a healthy association of 40 or 50 people. It was quite extraordinary. It was almost as if that period of enforced imprisonment, for want of a better word, restriction of privileges, maybe better. You know what I mean? It just shifted people's heads, and whether that has been true for other associations up and down the country, I've got no idea. But for us, certainly it was. Anyway, so I'm part of the PRA, and I knew I had to ask for help. To be fair, the fire service did set me up with a series of sort of consultations, but it was I ended up, it was too hippie for me. You know what I mean? I ended up, I'm sure this is all good stuff, but basically somebody, the therapist would open up one of those lecture pointy things. Do you know what I mean? Like an aerial, a car aerial, and she'd wave it in front of me, right? And she'd say, what I want you to do is, when you feel something strange, tell me to stop moving the stick. I'm sitting there thinking, I have no idea what I'm supposed to be feeling here. And so I randomly selected a point for her to stop waving the stick. And then she starts rubbing the stick in the air and says, right, I'm rubbing out all the trauma. It wasn't for me. So,
but there are different courses of treatment, and again, for someone that may work for them, but it's finding what kind of works for you, isn't it? Clearly, that one wasn't for you.
I couldn't agree more. But that was the full extent of what I got from FRS. Having said that, I got it instantly. No waiting list, no mucking about. So you take it out, but it didn't work. It wasn't enough. And anyway, PRA and I thought I need to ask for help, because the whole thing with looking after mum during watching her pass away with Alzheimer's is not much fun. You know what I mean? It's a very challenging thing. And so I decided I'd approach Pete. I'd approach Pete Elcock at one of the PRA meetings. I can't tell you how nervous I was about having that conversation, about not being a hairy-ass paratrooper in front of all my hairy-ass paratrooper mates, who were all sort of hanging out, telling lies, embroidering our, you know what I mean, as you do, right? We're all telling stories. Everything's faster, everything's louder, right? And having to reach out and say, listen, I'm in a bit of a fucking mess, But to his credit, he went away, made a few phone calls, and set me up with a one-to-one therapist, and that was through something called Stepway, and they're a veterans organization, and again, I had it. It was instant, and it was at no cost to me. And it was in that journey that we were able to explore through talk therapy rather than a magic stick, And as a result of that, I was left with a toolkit of managing and handling, my own issues around anxiety when it presented itself, and it. I'm going to say it worked. It would be better and closer to the truth to say it is working. But I'm certainly in a much better place than I was at the point of diagnosis, and indeed after. I think looking after mum in some respects was a godsend, because suddenly, your issues are not terribly important, and you've got plenty to do, just making sure. Yeah, and that's important. I'm good. I'm lucky.
It's good. It's good to hear. It is good to hear. And it's like you said, you kind of nailed it there, where it's like, here we are as paratrooper reaching out for help. Still that bit around it, isn't there, where you feel like someone's going to judge you because of that, and it's like, why am I feeling like this? Are they going to see that as a sign of weakness? And that's everything I'm trying to kind of get rid of, or trying to help get rid of. There's a lot of organizations and a lot of people trying to do the same thing, and everything else, but it's good to see that something you went, or a route you went down, helped. And like you say, we all kind of, you go to the gym, you train your body, you kind of stretch, probably not as much as I should do, but them sort of things, and you kind of, so you're servicing your body, your kind of mental health, and your brain needs a service as well. And like you say, it's ongoing treatment, and if you need that kind of therapy and that treatment long term, but it keeps you kind of in a very good place, then it can't hurt, it can only be good.
I think the asking for help is huge, and then for myself, community has been really important, and community, I think, covers an awful lot of bases, and for me it just means people having some kind of support network, and actually the support network is not, they don't necessarily know they're a support network.
Yeah.
They're just people that you can have a beer with, you know what I mean? Spend a bit of time with. Yeah, community wherever you find it. Ask.
Yeah,
For me, it was, I had to ask for help. I asked for help, and then I got it. I mean, wow! Again, PRA, hats off, you know.
But that's the kind of biggie that again, and without fear of sounding like a stuck record, if no one knows you've got issues or you've got problems that you need to address, then you're not going to get the help. And you've got to make people aware that you kind of need that help, or people are too busy sometimes with their own lives and families that they won't notice. And I know we're kind of getting better at noticing the signs and symptoms of depression and anxiety and looking out for one another, but life's busy sometimes. So it is about kind of reaching out, and you've got to help yourself, which, you know, you clearly did. And it was the best way forward, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, it was. But yeah, it was, you know, I rocked up to the PRA meeting that day, knowing I wanted to have that conversation. And I was nervous as a kid from the point at which, and then I had to choose the right moment, you know, where I needed to have the conversation with Pete in isolation. But it was the smart move. And again, I can't thank Pete enough for the work that he did to find the right people for me to have those conversations. You know, a lot of that in my life, actually, just people doing you a solid, you know.
Yeah, that's good, pal. It's good. It's good to have them sort of people around you and stuff like that. And I think that does help. And again, in the communities, whether it's the military community, the fire service community, and that, they kind of, you know, they're like-minded individuals, aren't they? And you can, they're good for that. And they give you some stick as well. But like, I wouldn't have it any other way.
Music industry is the same, you know. When you go out on the road, when you put a touring party together, and you know, I talked about the various crew members. You become a family, you know. And again, it's a very high octane adrenaline rush.
I bet.
And you have that camaraderie.
Yeah.
You know, which we both understand is a magical thing, and it's just a blessing, isn't it? You know.
Absolutely, pal. Absolutely. Well, mate, it has been a pleasure. Your life's fascinated me, and I'm not going to lie. I find it absolutely fascinating. I could talk to you all day, pal. But I thank you for taking the time
Pleasure.
to come on and discuss all that, mate. I'll have a quick chat with you when you're finished. And if you can just now go away, give Noel and Liam a ring. Tell them about the podcast.
Tell them.
I need tickets.
I'll tell them.
Get me some ticket and all that, and then you know, sound.
I'll tell them. We'll get you up on stage.
Yeah, sound. I'll have a chat with you in a minute, mate. But thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure, pal.
Cheers, fella.
Thank you.